Are you looking for a Dynasty trade calculator that aligns with your own values? Because if you are, then I have the app for you, the Dynasty GM. The Dynasty GM's Dynasty trade calculator lets you run trade scenarios through the app that align with your own values by allowing you to input your own rank set, the Dynasty Nerds rank set, or your favorite analyst rank set. This is going to make sure the trades align with your values to make sure you're getting the best end of the deal possible. Go ahead and download the app for free in your app store.
Ready, set, hut, hut. Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Rich Dotson. He's Garret Price.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Matt is out today. He's started to feel a little bit under the weather, so we told him, hey, stay home. And since Matt was staying home, I told Garret, I was like, hey, stay home, buddy. We'll just do remote.
Everybody stay home. We're all just staying home.
I don't want to smell you today. So
I just got my hair cut, so, you know.
Oh, you look, dude, from here, it looks good. From here, it looks good.
But, I mean, looks and smells don't always, equate to the same thing.
I'm not very mobile. I hurt my back the other day. I was doing like deadlifts, which I don't ever do anyway. So obviously my form was off, and like I hurt my back, and like I was like, oh, dude, I'm too old for this. Like, I was like, let me just try this.
Curls for the girls.
Yeah, I was like, let me just try this exercise. I don't really do this very often, or / ever. I did it once. I was like, oh, it wasn't bad. Then a second attempt, like second time workout, I did it. Like I was like, okay, 5, and I just felt that like shooting pain in my lower back. Put it right down. I was like, yeah, no more of that. And now like
we are done.
Yeah, 3 days later, and I'm like, oh, dude, just get better. This hurts. So here we are. Yeah, lower back, Rich, sick Matt, and fresh haircut Garret are here to talk about quarterback buys. And obviously, when we talk about this stuff, we preface it by saying Superflex tight end premium is where we usually kind of go. Yep. And that's where we're going to be talking about these quarterbacks here. Before we get into that, let's talk about the quarterback market as a whole real quick. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of want to dive into like the one QB strategy as well. So I know you and I were talking pre-show a little bit, like we kind of agreed right now, ADP wise, like of current ADP, like I'm pretty content with like how the quarterback ADP is. Like it's pretty straightforward. I feel like the community for the most part has it right.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Like looking through when I was, because the show's buys and sells. Mm-hmm. So this was much more difficult for me, especially on the sell aspect, because there's not a lot to really disagree with on where the community has them. Now, I think where you could possibly disagree is like us as a podcast on the whole value quarterbacks a little bit more than the general consensus. So maybe just like everybody moved up a little bit, especially after that, like, first round or so, like we would move quite a few guys, maybe up 10 to 15 spots. But like overall, I don't think that there are some clear and obvious, like this guy is way off ADP wise, whether it's a buy or a sell. Like I don't think really any of these guys are huge opportunities to get out from under a guy or to get a guy. Now, that being said, even little wins sometimes are huge for your team. So even if we can just get, hey, can I get my team 5% better because I made this move? That could end up really paying off long-term, because if you get 5% more points than your opponent in the championship game, bingo, I just won a championship. So even if these ones might not be as earth-shattering as maybe some of the other positions will be, I still think it's a good discussion to have. And you're right. It's a little different from Superflex tight end premium than it is to one quarterback too. So I'm excited to kind of look at it from both perspectives.
Yeah, the only ADP like I thought was like good, like, oh wow, this is really good value, was like Baker Mayfield, Michael Penix. I thought Bo Nix was kind of really good value too. Obviously, JJ McCarthy is going to slip just a little bit, but not too much. Like he was actually kind of like pretty comfortable where I was. Those were the kind of the only guys I saw like, I'd have those guys a little bit higher. Maybe like I'd maybe re-rank them here and there, but for the most part, you're right. Like you said earlier, like we push the quarterbacks up when it comes to overall ranking anyways, because it really just comes down to the haves and have nots. Like I want to, when you get to Superflex leagues, there's only a handful of teams that are going to have 3 quarterbacks, right? Because there's only so many of those go around. You got about 8 teams at max that can have in a 12-man league a starting third quarterback. So there's going to be 4 teams no matter what without that other quarterback. And it really helps during the bye weeks, or injury, or more importantly, trade value, right? Because it's the haves and the have-nots. And even at bottom 8, like those are the guys you really don't want on your roster anyways. I mean, the Browns don't even have a starting quarterback, right? So it can get pretty ugly down there. And they are going to be the most highest scoring position. So in Superflex, it's easy, right? Like we're going to push those guys up in ADP, like we mentioned. For one QB, before getting to our buys and sells, we haven't talked about this yet. And if we have, it's been, years upon years. Like when it comes to grabbing a quarterback and trading for a quarterback in a one QB league, how do you look at that? Because obviously that gets pushed down to, we all know, like it's the least valuable position, right? Because everybody can get a quarterback 1, and when you get quarterback like 7 through 12, like they're all pretty close in points per game. It's not too far off. So it's a position you could wait on, and I look at it as like, you really kind of want to try, like if you can, like as you build up with the knowing that is the rule, right? The quarterback is a little bit least valuable. You could draft a guy in the second round. You can get a guy like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels in the second round of your rookie drafts. They're going to fade a little bit in startups. You'll still have the guys take, Josh Allen early, Jalen Hurts early, Jaden Daniels early now. But for you, what is your strategy and thought process? Like, do you want to acquire positional talent to go out there and get that top 6 quarterback, which is going to score significantly more than anybody else in all of fantasy football for the most part, outside of, the Saquons and Jamar Chases? Or are you comfortable with that quarterback 7 through 12?
So if we did a startup mock draft 1 QB this past summer, which was really fun, if you remember that, because we don't do that very often. And, we do need to do maybe a little bit more 1 QB discussion at times for the people that don't play it. But it was a fun exercise because it was a good reminder on the quarterback position just in general. So for me overall, it depends on the cost. Like if I can get, this year for points wise, Lamar Jackson ended up far and away being the top quarterback overall. He ended up having 25 points a game. Then we, 3 guys at 22 points a game, and Allen, Burrow, and Baker. Jane Daniels wasn't far behind. So that was kind of a tier in and of itself. Jalen Hurts really was in that tier. He just missed 2 games at the end of the year there. But all those guys were right in the 20s. But then you have a lot of players right after that in the mid 17 to 19 range. And honestly, I'm just as comfortable with any one of those guys. Yeah, you're losing 2 to 3, maybe 4 points from some of the top tier guys. But it's all going to be depending on the draft. Like if we're looking at this from a startup, if it's a league where they really still value the quarterback quite a bit, and in the second round, third round, we start seeing these quarterbacks go, okay, I'm probably going to be the last one to take a quarterback. But if we're playing with a bunch of guys that know the traditional wisdom of waiting on 1 QB, and we're starting the 5th round, nobody's taking somebody, well, I'm going to go ahead and grab Josh Allen. I'm going to go ahead and grab one of these top tier guys because it is still an extra value. So I think it really kind of comes down to the league specifics. But all of that being said, I'm just as comfortable waiting and drafting a guy because you look at it this year, if you were to have drafted just based on this season, so we're talking about a redraft, Justin Herbert was going as quarterback 17, 18 off the board. Well, he still finished with 17 points per game, and in the second half of his season was really, really good. You were able to get a guy like Baker Mayfield really late. You were able to get a guy like there's a lot of these guys that you can get really late that can still give you good numbers. So I'm just as comfortable waiting. Sometimes in 1 QBs, I'll even actually draft the 14th or 15th quarterback off the board because some guys have gotten their second quarterback before I even get my first. It's just such a deep position that if there is not that ability to be able to start two, it's just a lot easier to build up the other positions and just kind of wait there.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. Unless like it screams value at me, like, you know, I'm in the fourth, like he's there in the fourth, like Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, like would really scream out at me, like, oh wow, like, this is kind of really hard to pass up.
Right.
And like after that, like maybe in the fifth, probably not even there. I'm with you. I'm just gonna go ahead and wait and take a guy, knowing I can get a guy like Brock Purdy, who averaged 18.6 points per game last year, which is only 3 points off of Jaden Daniels, right? Like, which is crazy, right. Like 3 points per game. And I'm going to use where everybody else is taking that quarterback. Cause that's it is like in the 1 QB leagues, you take the quarterback there, you're missing out on your wide receiver 2, your running back 2, your tight end 1 to take that quarterback. And not saying that player, it's a very safe pick when you get a Josh Allen, right? And a Jaden Daniels, even though he's only a rookie, it's kind of hard to safe. Let's call it like a Joe Burrow, a Lamar Jackson, a Jalen Hurts. They're very safe. But again, I'm always looking at my overall team structure. Like I'm trying to build the highest scoring team. So if I could tear down just a little bit on a couple of points per game and get, you know, grab the 12th quarterback taken off the board, and whether that's Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, or, you know, even like a Bo Nix or a Brock Purdy or a Baker Mayfield, for example, like, and Baker would have been a home run because he was tied for 3rd overall in points per game, right? That'd have been a slam dunk. So like, and that's what I mean. You can kind of wait on these guys. And what I do then is when I grab those guys, I try to make sure I don't wait too long to get my second guy too in that format. So I kind of like insulate myself a little bit more, but I'm with you. It's way less valuable. It's way easier to trade for an old quarterback in a 1 QB league, like so much easier. You know, like a couple more years when Pat Mahomes is real old, he'll be attainable for like a 2nd round pick for the most part. Like these guys, they just get old, you know, more available. And I know Aaron Rodgers was down, but like prior to, if you go back to even his MVP years, like Aaron Rodgers for like a 2nd round pick, and you're talking about like a high end quarterback one. You know, so if you go back to 2022. Where, you know, Aaron Rodgers was quarterback 13 overall, and he averaged, that was a bad year for Aaron Rodgers, 14.8 in 2022. But, you know what I mean? Tom Brady played that year. He averaged 16.5. He could have been disgustingly cheap. Like there's so many of those guys that are out there that you can go trade for, and gambling and upside. You can get guys like Geno Smith for 3rd, 4th round picks in 1 QB leagues.
And in those drafts, in your rookie drafts, it's once again very easy. Like if you get an older guy, you're just kind of continuing to ride the older guy, and you know, you get 2 or 3 years out of him, and then get 2 or 3 years out of the next one. And one of my buys is actually one of those guys kind of right now. So we'll talk about him in a little bit here. But you ride them for 2, 3, sometimes you get lucky and get 4 or 5 years out of them. But what can you do at the same time? You can look at the end of the first, beginning of the second, and even into the late second, and still take high upside quarterbacks. Will they all hit? No. You could have gone back-to-back years and say, okay, I'm going to take the guys with the most upside at the quarterback position. 2 years ago, you would have got Anthony Richardson. You've been like, dang it. I just took him at, you know, with the 2-3 pick, and I failed. But then the next year, okay, with the 112 pick, I'm going to take Jaden Daniels. Well, that one hit. That one did really well. So, you know, you just keep taking those high upside guys because you know you have a solid, steady option to get you 16 to 19 points. And then you gamble on the players that can get you into the 20s. And you're not having to use a premium pick to do it. You can use some of these later assets to do it. You know, Jalen Hurts a few years back, you're using 3rd, 4th round picks to get a guy like that. Justin Herbert a few years back, you're using late picks. Lamar Jackson, late picks. Like you're not having to use these, but these are the guys with the most upside, and you can gamble a little bit more in 1 QB when you're taking these quarterbacks. Whereas in Superflex, you're like, I got to hit because I'm taking this guy at 1-3 right now. I can't afford to miss on this. So I got to be maybe a little more conservative than I'd be otherwise.
Yeah. You either taking like wide receiver 9, 10, or running back like 8, you know, you gamble on the Michael Penix, you gamble on the Bo Nix in your 1 QB league, like very late second, if you're a contender, high 3rd. And if they hit, they hit. Sometimes, and you're right. They don't all hit. Like we're using examples of hits, but still when they're late, like it doesn't cost you anything, right? Like they're throwaway picks, non-roster cloggers, you can get out from under them pretty easy. So with that being said, this is Superflex tight end premium ADP we're working on, and what are some good buys? Because everybody can use a good quarterback in Superflex. And my first buy, Garrett, is somebody who I've mentioned on this show multiple times, and that's what's tough. You know, when we do these shows, we do 3 shows a week for 11 years. It's kind of hard because these names come up like, oh, I think he's a good buy. I think he's a good sell. So sometimes like I try to pivot off of those guys. And I was really looking at like 2 players. I thought Trevor Lawrence was, ADP wise and for being 25, some good upside there. But I'm going to stick with the guy who I've been talking about for over a year now. So for over 12 months, I said this is one of the best buys in Superflex. I think he's one of the best values. And I really still think he is. And I think it's going to change here pretty quickly, about a little over a month. And that's Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. You know, he just turned 25 years old. So he's only 2 months older than Bo Nix. He's only 4 months older than Michael Penix, right? So like, and he's about to sign a big deal with San Francisco. They've already said they want to extend him. So like, you can almost look at like he's insulated with that, top 10 rookie pick, because he's gonna get paid big money and a lot of it's gonna be guaranteed, right? So he's about to get very insulated. Brock Purdy is. And when you look at him, what he's done for where he's going right now, he has an ADP of like QB, like 14, 15, which is, you can say, hey, that's not too bad, Rich. That's pretty fine. But my problem is that he outproduces his ADP. So even though he's like quarterback 14, 15 ADP, he's been a QB1 every time he's been the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. When he came in 2022, he didn't start till week 13. From week 13 to 18, he was quarterback 9 on the year. In 2023, weeks 1 through 17, he was quarterback 6 on the year. Last year, he was quarterback number 12. And like I said, he's so young right now, and he's proven, right? Like he's taken the 49ers to the Super Bowl. He's taken them to the NFC Championship. He's a proven asset. And the number one thing here, which is what I love, and we talk about this all the time when it comes to NFL draft, is like, okay, what system are you going to play in, and who's your coach? How does that work for you? And what is he in? He's in a Kyle Shanahan system. It's a very, very quarterback-friendly system. The offense is built to maximize the quarterback's efficiency, right? It has a strong run game, versatile playmakers. It simplifies the reads for the quarterbacks. It sets up Brock Purdy for success. Kind of like the Kevin O'Connell offense, right? Whoever that quarterback is, he's going to be set up for success. And with that age, in that contract, like you're getting somebody, if this was, somebody taken for what he's done in his age, if he was a top 10 NFL draft pick, like I would promise you for the most part, he'd probably have a higher ADP. But the fact that he was the Mr. Irrelevant, the fact that he hasn't got that contract yet, and honestly, the only reason he has not gotten a contract is because he has not been eligible to sign the contract.
Right.
So, that has kind of pushed him down right now, and it really makes him a little bit undervalued. And what else does Brock Purdy bring to the table? He brings durability and health, right? Like we see guys go down, we see guys get nicked up, and this is somebody who's year in and year out been in that starting lineup and been healthy for the San Francisco 49ers. He brings you consistent play for the most part, right? Like you get guys that can have some really good games, definitely some of these Russian quarterbacks that, if they don't have that big rushing game, their numbers can go down a little bit. He's been pretty consistent there as well in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So when you look at a quarterback who's only been the starter for 2.5 years in this system, who's been a quarterback 1, every time he's been the starting for the whole 2.5 years, he's been the starting quarterback for the 49ers, you would be silly if there's not room for an improvement for Brock Purdy as well, for him to grow into this offense at only 25 years old. That's kind of like saying, hey, Michael Penix and, Bo Nix aren't going to get better in their offenses, even though he's had a longer time into it. As these NFL players grow and they mature and they see more NFL defenses, they get smarter. You hope, right? That's the whole point. So for me, there's a high chance that Brock Purdy's even get more efficient as an NFL quarterback, which again will be a very good safety net for him to be a quarterback 1. Even if he takes a slight down tick, he's still, like you mentioned, when you get from quarterback like 8 to 14, they're all pretty close, right? So you can feel really good about Brock Purdy probably for the next 5 to 8 years in this offense, which again, you'd say the same thing about Michael Penix or Bo Nix, 2 rookies in Superflex. You'd be a little bit more probably excited about for it. So right now they've done nothing. They shipped off Trey Lance. The backup situation, there's nothing to worry about. When you look at this overall situation for Brock Purdy, I get real excited about where he is. These are all the reasons why I feel like he's been a very undervalued Superflex player, and somebody you can actually go out there and get. Because again, it always talks about, okay, buy, who's selling. Brock Purdy kind of falls in that category. He hits that tier right around there. Like, he is obtainable, right? Like,
yeah.
And honestly, my sell, when we get into it, kind of ties into this, because my sell is not like somebody who I don't hate him. I just, like, for me, for the value, and I have reasons why, I'd rather tier down. And this is the exact player I like to get, because I would love to give up some names that are like in that same range and just pick up an extra possible asset. Like, hey, I'll give you player X for Brock Purdy in a second. And somebody like, definitely for the name that I'm about to say for myself, people like, oh, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I like this player way more. He has a higher upside because of the Russian stats. And Brock Purdy's not a turtle, right? He doesn't have cement legs. He can give you something. That's not his strong point, but like, it's not Joe Burrow's strong point
this year.
Yeah, he did. But it's like, it's not Joe Burrow's strong point either, right? You're not asking Joe Burrow to go out there and run. So for me, I think Purdy is a perfect tier down plus quarterback that I would feel really comfortable with his age and production to have in my Superflex league. He's one of my favorite buys, has been now for over 12 months. But I think that window is really going to start close here pretty soon, because I think once he signs that contract, that's going to change people's perception slightly on Brock Purdy. And I can see his ADP rise because he's going to be a little bit more insulated with that contract, and people are going to be drawn to that and draft a little bit higher in Superflex drafts.
Yeah, no, I think Brock Purdy's a great one. We have been talking about him a lot, and he even fell into kind of that model that we had early on in the season. Be curious, I'll have to run it back again and kind of see how things finished up. But we did that in-season show where it talked about how important is it for quarterbacks that avoid taking sacks, and also rush for a certain amount of yards per game, how that plays out. And we saw all of the guys hit like high-end quarterbacks, and then Brock Purdy was on the list. And you're like, that bodes pretty well for a guy like Brock Purdy to be in a list with these guys. So I think he is. I think he's a pretty obvious one. And unlike some of the other guys we'll talk about, like, everything that could have gone wrong for this team went wrong this year. So you would expect there to be better cohesion in this offense next year. It should be a healthier team. You're getting your first round pick from last year is now a year older in Ricky Pearsall. Juwan Johnson's kind of evolved his game a little bit into becoming a more legitimate asset. So you look at this team overall, and they're a team that really should be a playoff team. And it would not surprise me if there is some sort of revenge tour next year where these guys play just pissed off and they don't feel like they got the respect they deserve. And you look at a lot of these players on this team, they're similar to some other teams where outside of a guy like Brock Purdy, you look at a lot of the other names, how much time left do they have? Like, how many years left do they really have to win a Super Bowl? How close are they to saying, hey, we might have to start looking at, turning the page and starting to look at the future and some of these older assets, even on offense, defense. Trent Williams is towards the end of his career. Christian McCaffrey, who knows how much longer he has. Debo is, Debo. Even guys on defense, Nick Bosa is not a spring chicken anymore. Like, there's a lot of these situations where, like, that window could be closing for them. They're going to have to make something happen this year. So I do think it's going to be a good season this year for the 49ers. And I think Brock Purdy will be a big part of that. Nice. All right, let's go to my buy. And the buy that I have here, I was trying to think, like, whose value was depressed quite a bit from where he was at before. And I talked about, when we were looking at the 1 QB and that kind of stuff, looking at some of the little bit older quarterbacks, and sometimes they can present a value. Now, it's weird to say that a 32-year-old quarterback is old, because in today's football, there's a good chance that he still has 6 to 8 seasons left. That's just kind of how long these guys are playing these days. But I went with Dak Prescott as a guy that I'm looking to potentially buy. And part of that is because ADP right now, he's looking at quarterback 20. So he's really kind of being depressed in value. He's down there quite a bit. Even some of the young guys that haven't shown a lot yet, like a Michael Penix, his ADP is higher than Dak Prescott. And then there's a couple other guys like JJ McCarthy and Bryce Young that are less than a round away from Dak Prescott. And I get it. You know, he came off a season where he was hurt. The Cowboys disappointed overall once again. But let's remember, first of all, Dak Prescott did just sign a 4-year deal. And this was not a 4-year deal that was just, you know, some piddly like little deal. No, there's a huge cap hit over the next several seasons. The cap hit, well, we'll just go with the dead cap. We won't even say the cap hit. But for the next 3 years, $151 million, $62 million, and then $34 million dead cap with a $61 million regular cap hit. So either way, like, this guy is going to be part of the Dallas Cowboys for the foreseeable future. Now, you could say, well, Garrett, they brought in Brian Schottenheimer. That's not necessarily the name that everybody wanted as far as the next, you know, guru for this team. But Schottenheimer has actually done pretty well for Dak Prescott. One of Dak Prescott's best seasons overall as a pro was actually in 2023 statistically. So that was just the year before. And he was the offensive coordinator. Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator for Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott was the third quarterback in fantasy points that season, averaged over 20 points per game, with arguably the exact same offense that they have at the moment. It was basically CeeDee Lamb, and that's about it. We don't have a real running game. We don't really have anybody else catching the ball. Maybe Jake Ferguson, maybe not. I guess we got Brandon Cook. Like, it was the same team that we have right now offensively. But one, he's getting healthy. Two, like I said, the same offensive coordinator that led him to a quarterback 3 season. But three, the Cowboys have a top 12 pick this season. And the reason I say top 12 instead of just 12 is they seem like a team that if they identify a guy that they really like, I could see them moving up to get that guy. And I think there's 2 names offensively that they could be strongly considering that would be a really nice get for a guy like Dak Prescott. First one, Ashton Genty. Obvious name. He's been linked to the Dallas Cowboys for a long time. You add in a running back like that, some of Dallas's best years, and Dak Prescott putting up big numbers while doing it, were when him and Zeke Elliott were dealing together. The play action works a lot better when you actually have a run threat. Second guy, Tet McMillan. You add in another big-time bona fide wide receiver across from CeeDee Lamb, that all of a sudden opens up that offense a lot. So I could easily see, and if they don't take somebody in the first round, I would be shocked if they don't address at least one of those 2 positions in the first 2 rounds. Like, they seem like locks to address either the wide receiver or the running back position with how rough this offense was at times this year. So with the depreciated cost of Dak Prescott and he's had 3 top 3 seasons before. So it's not like it's unheard of for him to be a top tier quarterback. He's done it several times. And you only have to go back 2 years ago to see him do it recently. So I think right now, bang for your buck, Dak Prescott is one of my favorite buys.
Yeah, he falls in that category again. I'm pretty comfortable with his ADP for where it is because everything you just mentioned is like, wow, there's a lot of mystery there. Like everything, like Dak's just in like a really bad situation, right? And they still have to pay Micah Parsons there as well. So it's not like there's going to be boatloads of money around there for Dallas. So they're going to have to build this team through the draft. They're going to find these rookie contracts. And listen, this is a team that's actually, Stephen Jones has done a really good job drafting the Dallas Cowboys for a while now. So yeah, Ashton Genty is probably the number 1 player mock there. I would love to see them be able to add like a Tet McMillan, but as you said, even in the second round, there's somebody out there to go ahead and get And you do get like you have like 5 more years of Dak, and it just shows value for what he's brought to the table. Even if you have a coaching change, he still has the same offensive coordinator work with him. Like you mentioned, Brian Schottenheimer, so there's some consistency there as well. So he definitely offers for where he's going so much more upside for where he goes. I'm a little bit more comfortable with him there because I'm so nervous. Like outside of like, it's not even just the weapons he has; it's also that offensive line. I know they got Luke Schoonmaker. They've asked a second round pick there. They got Jake Ferguson's been there really nice as well. But they need another receiver to kind of offset CeeDee Lamb. Ashton Genty, who's a do-it-all 3-down running back, would be tremendous. You can't emphasize enough what play action and motions, what you want out of these offenses today in the NFL. That's what's going to bode really well for quarterbacks to have a lot of high success. Right now, Dallas hasn't been doing it. They've had no running game whatsoever. Listen, Rico Dowdle's been nice. You could say he's a buy for like how cheap he's been, the chance that he can go somewhere and just be kind of the number 2 somewhere. He's been a pretty solid running back for Dallas Cowboys, but he doesn't scare defenses. Definitely when their number 2 receiver is like, they trade for a guy like Jonathan Mingo out there. So yeah, I mean, value wise, I think for somebody who's shown it to us, who's not like 34, 35 years old, you're right. Dak is tremendous value right now. I could definitely see people getting out from under him, the pivot at quarterback, strictly because they are scared of the Dallas situation. So definitely a really solid buy there.
All right, let's move on to sells. And Rich, I don't know about, I forget, you told me who you have, but I struggled with sells so bad. And I'm even like backtracking a little bit off my sell, but I'll get to it in a second. There's just nobody like all of the ADP. I'm like, yep, I agree. Yep, I agree. Oh, actually, I think he's a buy. Yep, I agree. Yep, I agree. Oh, I think he's a buy. Like you're just going through the list. There's like quarterback is just pretty chalk right now.
It is pretty chalk. So I'm interested to hear who your sell is and who my sell is. Before that, let me sell you on something else though.
Ooh, do it.
Our friends over at my FFPC right now, it's orphan season. It is such a cool time over there because you can go in there and see teams that have been left behind and abandoned, and you can bid on them, right? You can get into a $1,000 league potentially for like $600. Like this is your chance to get over there at my FFPC and find some orphans or pay a little bit more for a contender that can win now and recoup your money right away. And right now, as always, you've heard it here 100 times, using that promo code NERDS is going to give you $25 off any entry in any contest they have. And listen, my FFPC is such a fantastic platform. It's why they've been a partner of ours for going on 4 years now. It's because it's the safest place to play Dynasty. They started in 2010 and they've never had a league fold since then. Like if you're worried about joining a Dynasty league and trading away your future first round picks or players for future first round picks, there's some nervousness possibility if you don't feel that security because that league could fold and you just spent 2 years rebuilding for the future and then there's no future. So not only does my FFPC offer a terrific platform, they also give you the security that league will never fold because they've never had a league fold. And it also gives you an opportunity to play at high stakes levels. And right now, if you have friends, right? Say you play in $100 league and you study Dynasty and you take it to another level and listen to these podcasts, use our tools, and you feel like you're an exceptional Dynasty player, you're ready to take your game to another level and play in a high stakes league. My FFPC gives you that. You don't have to have friends to get together. You can join up to a league for up to $2,500. And again, you don't have to worry about the team structure because that league will never fail. So get out there. They're not doing their startup leagues now. It's orphan season. So get out there. Check out those orphans. Remember, it's first come, first serve, right? So go over to myffpc.com, myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Use that promo code NERDS. We'll also have the link in the podcast bios and everywhere. So you just click that and go there as well. You get $25 off. See if there's an orphan for you. Get in there, some high stakes league. And if not, we'll be talking about the regular season when it gets ready to launch. So myffpc.com, promo code NERDS. So sells. I know you said you're already kind of like pivoting off of your sell a little bit.
Yeah.
Which way you might go. Who is your sell, Garrett?
So
are you pivoting?
My real, I'm not actually going to pivot. My real sell, but I feel like we've talked about this guy at nauseum, so I did not want to make him the sell. The obvious sell is CJ Stroud. Like CJ Stroud is the obvious sell. He right now is quarterback 8 on our ADP. Like, if you can even get like roughly top 12 value, I'm willing to sell. So like, he's the obvious one for me. Does not have the rushing upside. Just lost his offensive coordinator. I don't think Diggs is going to be back. Tank Dell is going to be out for the year. Like, I think it's going to be a lot of him being quarterback 10 to 15 over his career, which is fine, but it's not a difference maker. So he's the real sell. Like, if I really had to put it, like, he is the guy, but I didn't want to spend time doing it. So I looked at everybody else around him. I'm not selling Josh Allen, not selling Daniels. Lamar's fine. Mahomes is fine. Hurts is fine. Burrow's fine. Herbert's probably a buy. Jordan Love's probably a buy. Caleb's probably a buy. Drake May's fine. We'll talk about yours in a second here, so I'll skip him. Bo Nix is fine or a buy. Brock Purdy. Anthony Richardson, we know he's like a huge one. But so I went through all these guys, and finally where I got to a guy where I was like, could I see the floor falling a little bit and the ceiling not being as high as it was? And it was Jared Goff for me. Now, Jared Goff has kind of perennially been just this, he's better than advertised. He's kind of always a value. So it feels wrong to make him a sell. The reason I ended up sticking with him, even though I don't love it, I'm not actively looking to sell him, but if I can find the right trade partner for the right player that I think has a little more upside, I'm willing to do it. And the reason being, I legitimately am nervous about Ben Johnson leaving. Like, that's the main crux of all of it. Is Jared Goff is a good player when everything around him is going as it should. When it's not, he's a replacement level quarterback. And I think everyone's known that. That's why he got dealt from LA for a Matthew Stafford, because they viewed Stafford as a guy that could elevate them. And what they do, they won the Super Bowl. So I think Goff is a very solid player, but he's not a difference-making player. There was also a little more inconsistency at times. I mean, like, look, he two years in a row, he finished as a top 7 quarterback. So he's had some very good years. But there were like some roller coaster times for him this year that were tough, especially like right before the playoffs. He had a really good playoffs, but right leading into the playoffs, a 9.6, 12.8, then a huge game, 34.6, then 10.8, 16.9. He was just kind of all over the place there leading up to it. And I just don't know how things are going to go moving forward. Is the loss of Ben Johnson, I can't imagine them getting better on offense. They were the best offense in football. So I can't imagine them getting better with losing him. The question is, do they fall off just a tiny bit, maintain like somewhere around there, or do they fall to kind of like a middle of the road offense? And that's the big question. And so for me, I would rather not be left holding the bag and just give me somebody that maybe has either like a little bit higher of a ceiling. So like right after him is a Michael Penix. Is it a higher risk? Absolutely. But could it be a higher reward and you're getting like 8 years younger? Yeah, it absolutely could be. So somebody like that, JJ McCarthy's going after him. I'd be fine with that. I view him and Tua similarly, and you've got about about a round and a half difference between them. So that was, like I said, I don't love it. I'm not actively like pushing, you've got to sell Jared Goff. If you've got him and no good offers, cool, just hold on to him. But if there's somebody that, you're able to say, hey, I'll give you Jared Goff in a second and you give me Baker Mayfield, like, let me try to upgrade a little bit, that kind of thing. Like those are the types of things I'm looking to do. So like I said, I don't love it, but he was the first guy that felt like things could drastically change negatively for him.
Yeah, the unknown of Jared Goff. I don't hate it. I mean, I traded for Jared. I gave up Pat Mahomes for Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff in a Superflex league this year.
Getting a 2-for-1 is nice.
Yeah, I got a 2-for-1 deal. And I mean, everything you said, I can't really argue. Everybody knows, if you don't know, like the home and away stats for Jared Goff, like he had
a lot of dome games this year too.
Yeah, exactly. They're almost all home games. So when you can pull him out of the dome, his numbers go down pretty drastically, like over 5 points per game. So I don't hate it. And you started off too, right, with CJ Stroud. When it comes to ADP, he's definitely the clear cut, like overpriced player for what you get. Like
Right.
a definitely massive tier down player. You can probably get, if you trade CJ Stroud for Brock Purdy in a first, like in a decent first, like, yeah, I'm all over that one. So I like those points about Goff. I got a lot of Goff shares because over the years, I feel like he has been a good solid
He's been a
buy for
value.
what you get
Yeah.
as a QB2, and you've got a couple of QB1 years out of it, so it has proven efficient.
Paid off.
And again, I mean, I'm always searching for value. I mean, that's the key of Dynasty, right? Like during your startup and going for after that, you're just constantly searching for value for your team, and that's what he offers. And my player here too, like he's a tier down player. Like he's been very solid, but I have some concerns. And my sell is Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. He's going to be 28 years old this year. Just finished his QB 11 overall, weeks 1 through 17. So a quarterback 1, right? He averaged 17.5 points per game, which is good for quarterback 2. And you mentioned Jared Goff outproduced him this year. He averaged 20.3 points per game. Brock Purdy averaged 18.6 points per game, did better. Bo Nix did better, averaged 18.4. Sam Darnold did better, averaged 19.5. And Baker Mayfield did significantly better, averaging 22.4. So when I say tier down, again, can I get a second in Brock Purdy for Kyler Murray? Because everybody's like in love with that Russian upside. Probably. Can I get a couple picks for Baker Mayfield, a couple picks for Brock Purdy or Kyler Murray? Yeah, I want to do that. With Kyler Murray, what you're getting is, I think there's a couple of people after him that go ADP wise that I'm interested in tearing down at. It's Bo Nix, Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield. Not even be very interested in Trevor Lawrence for the right price, because T-Law, he averaged 15.2 points per game. He was banged up this year. And I really like the Liam Cohen addition and having Brian Thomas go into his second year. So I think he's a good buy too. But for me, there's always going to be the injury concerns with Kyler Murray, right? When you look at him, this year he played all 17 games, but that was the first time in 4 years that Kyler Murray has played all the games in the season. And being 5'10", being a Russian quarterback who, listen, even when he got hurt, like it was a non-contact ACL injury. So, but that does offer the upside. Those Russian quarterbacks, they have a negative to it where like you could be worried about them getting hurt Russian. Now, over the years, if you look at the true raw data, that you kind of throw that all out the window because most of those Russian quarterbacks don't get hurt Russian. Like the stats are like actually less that they get hurt Russian compared to quarterbacks that get hurt outside of Russian. But still, it's not just his Russian size; it's just his size, right? Like when you have these 6'4", 280-pound guys coming at your 5'10", 200-pound quarterback, like that could scare you. Same thing about Bryce Young; like those things could scare you. So that kind of hurts me a little bit. The team has been taking a step back talent-wise. They haven't just been able to produce at a high level. They drafted Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison had a nice year, but there's not a lot of weapons out there. I know they just extended James Conner there. They got to boost up the offensive line. The coaching staff just been okay in this system.
They do have Trey McBride.
Yeah, they got Trey McBride there too. So, but again, I mean, those kind of players, those big weapons, definitely take away. Like he's not the guy that offers like all the other Russian quarterbacks offer that red zone Russian ability, right? Like, hey, they get in the red zone, a good chance he's going to rush in there. Not the case for Kyler Murray. Like you actually probably going to like take that back a little bit more because like the defense is more crowded to the line there. So it kind of hurts a guy like Kyler Murray a little bit more, and having those big weapons like Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. and even Michael Wilson gives you a higher chance to throw it. Definitely Trey McBride. Even I say that though, the guy can't score touchdowns until like later in the year.
Yeah.
So, and you look at some of his performances, like it's a little bit like you get some inconsistency, right? Like if Kyler doesn't bring you that Russian ability, like his numbers are down drastically. We've even seen his attempts per game go down over the years, right? Like if you go back to 2021, he averaged 4.3 attempts per game. In 2024, 2.2. And what's the number one thing we were like excited about for Kyler Murray? It was his rushing ability. So if you're going to start kind of like taking that a little bit back as he's starting to get a little bit older here and enter his 28-year season, that kind of wants me to step back a little bit here too. So I understand Kyler Murray is kind of cooled off in the Dynasty community a little bit as well. So like, I feel like this is an easy sell, but he falls right in that category. Can I get a little bit younger? And all those guys that I mentioned ahead of time are going to be 25 outside of Baker Mayfield, are going to be 25 years old. So if I get 3 years younger, and I know those guys all averaged more points per game this past year, doesn't mean they'll do it this year, but along with they're in that same range, I would rather take a guy Brock Purdy, who doesn't get hurt, who averages more per game, and is 3 years younger, who won't turn 26 until December, like 27th of next year or this year, I'd much rather do that because the long term, like he just worries me about his long term. You mentioned before, like, where do you get worried about these NFL teams, right? Like, he has a really big contract. If the Arizona Cardinals aren't winning, when he comes to 29, 30, it's going to be a lot harder for them to pass out on a quarterback and get out from under his contract if they feel like they can't win with a guy like Kyler Murray. Like, he's the kind of guy, you haven't heard his name this offseason. You're like, oh, well, could the Cardinals trade Kyler Murray, right? Like, I saw a couple of those rumors floating. So I'd much rather tear down on Kyler Murray. No disrespect to him. Still, he was a quarterback 1. Could definitely be a quarterback 2, but like even guys behind him, a guy like Caleb Williams, who should do better with Ben Johnson, should start ascending, right? And the 2026 class will have a much stronger quarterback class as well when you have like Nussmeier and Arch Manning coming in into the draft. So for me, when he's gonna be 29, there's only really like a couple more years left of value. Like, that's how I kind of view Kyler as. Like, I don't view him as that 35-year-old quarterback 1 as some of these guys, because that's not like how he never really wins. Accurate quarterback, really strong arm too. So it's definitely a possibility. But there's so many red flags out there with Kyler. I'd rather get a little bit more security at one of the most important positions in Superflex, right? One QB, way more comfortable with Kyler, right? Like, way more comfortable. Superflex, when like I need some long-term stability there that I feel a lot more confident in, go ahead and like give me the Bo Nix, give me the Michael Penix, definitely give me the Brock Purdy, and even give me the Trevor Lawrence, right? Like, give me those kind of quarterbacks that I feel more long-term stability with.
Speaking of the stability, so they're not going to do anything this year. $63 million dead cap, so his dead cap's actually even higher than his cap hit. But if things were to go sideways, and I think Gannon could be on the hot seat too if they don't have a good year this year. This is year 3. Very common year for guys. If they don't show much, they're gone. And, he's tied to Kyler Murray, whether he likes it or not. Kyler Murray's cap hit next year is $55 million, but the dead cap is only $20 million. Now, I know $20 million seems like a lot, but at the quarterback position, $20 million dead cap is not much at all. So they very well could get rid of him before that time. So just kind of a wait and see. The last thing I'll say on Kyler Murray too is the week-to-week inconsistency was a little bit frustrating with him this year. Just really up and down, starting in week 4 here. 10 points, 25, 12, 21, 22, 4, 28, 11, 17, 20, 10. Like, just up, down, up, down, up, down. Yep. Like, just that kind of stuff too is just enough for you as an owner to say, like, even if he's not getting me as many points, I'd rather just get a guy that gets me 16 points a week than a guy that is going to average 17. But is this the week where I get 11 from him, or is this the week that I get 21? I don't know.
And that's what I mentioned with those rushing upside. If he doesn't rush, like, you don't really get those games out of him. And his rushing statistics are going down per game. So, like, you're right. Like, I really try to avoid those roller coaster players off my dynasty roster. I really do, because when I get into playoffs, I need to set up lineup. I got to feel a lineup I feel very comfortable with. And in Superflex, unfortunately, with your quarterback, you're locked in, right? They're not starting anybody else in that Superflex. Like, you're starting Kyler Murray. Right. And he can win you a game, and maybe he'll lose you a game. So he's my sell. I love your sell as well. But like I said, we'll kind of go back to the beginning of the show. I think we feel pretty good about our overall ADP right now in Superflex overall. So it's a really good chance. Like, if you grab a Jaden Daniels 2 overall, you can wait a couple rounds and then grab like the Bo Nix. You can grab the Baker Mayfields and still feel really good about your team structure. So those were our quarterback sells. We'll be back tomorrow with our running back buys and sells. Can't wait to get into it.
See ya. Hey, Nerd Herd, Dynasty Nerds has an incredible new offer from Underdog Fantasy for new customers. When you sign up as a new customer, you'll get a chance at their new customer free pick. But that's not all. Underdog is also offering incredible deposit bonuses. Use the promo code NERDS when you first sign up, and Underdog will give you up to $1,000 in bonus cash with your first deposit. That's right, $1,000 to kickstart your fantasy football journey. Don't miss out on this fantastic opportunity. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app. Sign up today with promo code NERDS and start your journey to fantasy football glory today. Must be 18, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. And in Tennessee, call 1-800-889-9789.